In order for us to get started here, I want to answer a few yes-no questions about the book of Jonah. There are a lot of common questions about it. Historically, people have said this never could have happened. There's just no way. Well, we're going to learn over the next few weeks that there's a lot that's going on. In fact, today I'm going to give you a lot of the evidence behind that. Here's the first question. Is the book of Jonah a myth? Well, the answer is very clearly no. Did Jonah really exist? The answer is most definitely yes. Did he actually cause Nineveh to repent? The answer is yes. In fact, it is the only city in recorded history where the entire city repented and came to God. Now that's serious business, all right? Is there anything else in history or in the Bible that talks about Jonah? The answer is definitely yes. What's so significant about Nineveh? A lot. We'll be talking a little bit about that today, plus more over the next few weeks. Does God really, literally destroy cities or nations because of their iniquity? And the answer is yes. Another question, though, I think, which is relevant to us, does the book of Jonah mean anything for us today other than just a really interesting children's story? And the answer is absolutely. In fact, the study of Jonah, I'm believing, is going to be life-changing. Now, hear me well. The book of Jonah is not a parable. It doesn't fall into the category of parables at all. It's not written as a parable. It's a story. And it's about Jonah, but really everything in the Bible is not just about that other person that's featured. It's really about us. It's not just some fantastic story about a big fish. No, it's the story about our stubbornness. It's about God's grace. It's about our reluctance. It's about God's compassion. It's about our willingness to be used by God. It's about God's love for people who are lost, people who are far from Him. So I want to give you the basic storyline, and I also want to share a little bit of historical data, which will help you to understand what we're going to be talking about. Now, Nineveh was the capital of the ancient Assyrian Empire, but Assyrians were known as and still known as the most brutal of all nations in history. Did you know that? They're ruthless, and I'll just say it plain out, they were totally demonic. Some of the torture methods that they use that I even learned about in world history that you can find online, you can search it yourself. I'd rather not discuss them because it's sickening. They're described by historians as exceedingly vile and vicious. They're spoken of by the prophet Nahum as well. He describes Nineveh as a bloody city, a city full of lies and pillage, a city that has a mass of corpses, a city filled with immoral sex acts, and a city of sorceries. That's his description of that ancient wicked city. Now, the events that we find in the book of Jonah, this took place in the 750s BC. So it happened sometime during that decade. We can definitely narrow it into that zone. Now, the city of Nineveh today, it's in ruins, but it is completely surrounded. You can look it up on the map by the modern city of Mosul, Iraq. And that state they're in is called Nineveh. So it's basically Mosul that's in the state of Nineveh, but the ruins of Nineveh are actually surrounded by the city of Mosul today. It's about 500 miles northeast of Israel. Now, some people whom I've known in the military who've served over there describe Mosul and Nineveh as unbearably hot and windy. It's like you're standing in front of a fire that has a fan blowing on you. And we actually see that recorded in the book of Jonah chapter 4. Jonah didn't like the Ninevites. He really didn't. He didn't want them to be recipients of God's mercy, and he was very well aware of what they were capable of. In fact, he believed that they deserved severe divine punishment. So what happened is Jonah, controlled by his own emotions, he went in the opposite direction. He tried to go to a city called Tarshish, which is on the coast of southeastern or southwestern Spain, and he thought, well, if I go there, the Spirit of God won't follow me, but it did. I mean, there was the belief at that time that the Spirit of God dwelt basically in Israel. Outside of that, you get away from there, you're getting away from God. As the story goes on, he's on this ship. God It says God sent a storm, and the sailors threw Jonah overboard. Now, and this was actually at his request, his recommendation. They did this to satisfy the wrath of the gods or whatever was going on. But underneath there, God had provided this huge fish, that we're told. And this fish swallowed the prophet, but he was preserved inside the belly of this fish for 3 days. Now, it is possible, because our own history records that about 100 years ago, a seaman was swallowed by a large sperm whale. This happened out near the Falkland Islands. Do your own research on it. And 3 days later, when they were cutting it open, he was recovered alive in the belly of the whale. All right. But while he was inside the fish, Jonah, he began to seek God. He sought God for help, and he worshiped him. And basically, here's a map that basically shows what happened. So he started out in northern Israel, which is on the right, near the bottom of that arrow. And he came down to Joppa. That's where Joppa is. And then he was going to head all the way out to Tarshish, which is at the far side of what in this map says Spain, but this would have been the Iberian Peninsula on the Atlantic coast. But instead, he ended up in the northeast part of the Mediterranean. You see the squiggly line, that's where he actually ended up. So, what happened is Jonah was vomited out by this fish onto dry land. Here is what we do know. We do know this from ancient Assyrian art, that they believed, their religion believed, that a giant fish was going to threaten the destruction of the people of that area. And the religious tradition spoke of a man who was going to come out of a fish's mouth, and this man was going to give a message of destruction, and that whatever he said, they had better heed it and obey it. And in my studies of this, there had been at least 3 other previous signs in nature in the years immediately preceding this, and they had been interpreted as omens by the people of Nineveh. First of all, in the year 763 BC, there was a total eclipse over Nineveh. In 759 BC, there was a plague that struck the nation, and then there was a second plague that hit in 756 BC. So they were believing, they saw these as omens, as signs, and so they believed that divine judgment was on the horizon, and then a man comes bounding out of a fish's mouth, preaching judgment, okay? So Jonah, he prophesied to the people of Nineveh, and this is a time when there was a particular king, King Ashur-dan III. He was sitting on the throne of Assyria, again, which was based in Nineveh. So what Jonah did is he warned the people that they had 40 days of grace, but after that, judgment was going to come. But what happened is Nineveh completely turned to God. We'll see that later. It's amazing. Now history, this is outside the Bible, but history records that during the reign of Ashur-dan III, that there was this monotheistic religious awakening or revival that came to Nineveh. They were not monotheistic, all right? Not at all. These are ancient Sumerians who did not even believe anything about monotheism. Only the Jews at that time believed that way. And during that time, for about 100 years, history tells us that that Nineveh, that Assyria relaxed its military brutality. So God's judgment was relented, which is an important message regarding prophecy. And this happened because Nineveh, the people of Nineveh, including the king and everyone, they humbled themselves. So the city wasn't destroyed. Now, Jonah didn't like this outcome at all. Again, he didn't like Nineveh, and he was extremely angry with God, and he was so angry with God and so angry with himself that he even went there, that he just said, God, just kill me now, I want to die. Still though, what Jonah did is he waited for the city to be supernaturally destroyed. And he went to this mountain east of Nineveh to watch the vengeance of God. I've looked it up on the map, and it was pretty easy to figure it out myself, that this would have been the mountain because this is at the highest point. It's about 2 miles east of the ruins of ancient Nineveh, and it's exactly where the Bible said it would be. So he would have been able to be far enough away, because he probably thought it was going to be destroyed with fire and brimstone like Sodom and Gomorrah. He's going to stand back, watch this whole thing happen. And God provided Jonah this leafy vine which brought him shade from the blazing heat. And this made him happy. So he was happily watching, yeah, God's taking care of me. I'm fine and everything. And the next day, God decided, I'm going to provide a worm that destroyed the roots of this vine, and it died. And it was destroyed, and the heat became more intense, and there was a scorching wind, just like everybody says is over there, that just buffeted Jonah. So what did Jonah want to do? He wanted to die again. He was telling God, I'm angry because my little shady vine is gone. So what did God do? God corrected Jonah. He admonished him, and he showed the prophet how his affection was inappropriately focused on his own personal comfort rather than having affection for winning lost people. In fact, the scriptures are so clear. God corrected him because he had more compassion for a plant than he had for lost people. Jonah actually came from a little tiny village near Nazareth, which is where Jesus was raised, in northern Israel. According to a passage in 2 Kings chapter 14, it says that Jonah had actually had a prophetic ministry in Israel prior to him going to Nineveh. He prophesied about the restoration of the boundaries, the borders of Israel under the King Jeroboam II, and that's recorded not only in history but also in the Bible. And he's also one of only four of the writing prophets, only one of them, Jonah, is mentioned. Jesus mentioned him during his earthly ministry. And Jesus didn't just give him a casual mention. Jesus identified himself with Jonah, saying that like Jonah spent 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, that Jesus was going to spend 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So, like somebody told me recently, so if you believe in Jesus, you have to believe in the story of Jonah, because Jesus didn't lie about that.